My daughter-in-law smiled at me every morning over breakfast for 4 months. The whole time, she was selling my late wife's belongings online for extra cash. I said nothing. Then one afternoon, I handed her a gift I'd spent 3 weeks building with my own hands. She hugged me and said I was finally starting to feel like real family to her, until she opened it. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and drop a comment telling me what time it is, where you're watching from. Now let me tell you how this all started. I was refinishing an old rocking chair in my garage when my son called. I remember that detail clearly because I had wood stain on my hands and almost didn't answer. 31 years teaching high school woodshop teaches you to pay attention to your hands. Put down the brush before you pick up the phone. I set it carefully on the workbench and answered, "Dad, we've got a situation. Mold in the apartment. The whole bathroom wall, apparently. The landlord is dragging his feet and Cassandra is having reactions. Her eyes, her breathing. We need somewhere to stay while we sort this out. Maybe a couple weeks." I looked around my garage. 3 bedrooms, 2 of them empty since my son left for college 8 years ago, emptier still since my wife passed 2 years back. "Of course," I said. "Come home." They arrived on a Saturday with a rental truck. I helped carry boxes. Cassandra directed traffic with the confidence of someone who'd moved into houses before and intended to rearrange them. She was 31, my son Derek was 33. They'd been married 2 years, dating 3 years before that. I knew her well enough, knew she liked things organized her way, knew she found my garage workshops a little mystifying, knew she called me Raymond instead of Dad, which I never mentioned but noticed. The guest bedroom became their bedroom. The second empty room became her home office. She worked remotely for some marketing company and needed quiet. I started going to bed earlier to accommodate the quiet. The first 3 weeks were fine. More than fine. She cooked twice a week, good meals, real effort. Derek helped me in the garage on weekends, the way he used to in high school. We talked more in those 3 weeks than we had in the previous 2 years of holiday visits and occasional Sunday calls. I thought maybe this arrangement had silver linings. Then I went looking for my wife's cedar jewelry box. It had lived on top of her dresser for 30 years. After she passed, I left it exactly where it was. The dresser, the jewelry box, the small framed photo of her from our trip to Portland in 1987. I hadn't opened the box in 2 years. Couldn't bring myself to. But my sister-in-law was visiting in 2 months, and she'd asked if she could have the pearl earrings. My wife had promised them to her years ago. I figured I should look before the visit and make sure I knew where things were. The box was still on the dresser, but it was lighter. I set it on the bed and opened it slowly. Most of the pieces were there. The everyday rings, the costume jewelry, the silver bracelet Derek gave her for Mother's Day the year he was 17. But the pearl earrings were gone, and so was the gold chain necklace with the small diamond pendant I'd given her for our 25th anniversary, and her garnet ring, the one her mother had left her. I stood at that dresser for a long time. Then I closed the box and put it back exactly where it was. I didn't say anything. Instead, I went to my son's old room, pulled his childhood computer chair up to the small desk I still kept there, and I sat down with my laptop. I'm 66 years old and I taught teenagers for 3 decades, which means I know how to use the internet better than most people my age because I had to learn it just to keep up with my students. I typed into Facebook Marketplace, then eBay, then a site called Poshmark that a former student had once told me people use for selling personal items. I searched for the necklace first, 25th anniversary, small diamond pendant, 14-karat gold chain. Vintage style setting. My wife had always said it looked antique even though we'd bought it new. It took me about 40 minutes to find it. Same necklace, same chain length, same pendant. Listed for sale 2 weeks ago by an account with a profile photo of a sunset and the username Living Bargains. The account had been active for 4 months and had sold 11 other items in that time. I scrolled through the sold listings. A set of gold cufflinks I recognized as my father's. A vintage camera that had lived on my workshop shelf since 1994. 2 decorative bookends from the living room shelves that I had assumed I'd simply misplaced. I closed the laptop, went back to the garage, picked up my brush, and went back to the rocking chair. My hands were very steady. I've always been good at that. That evening at dinner, Cassandra asked if I'd thought about repainting the guest bathroom because the color was a little dated. I said I'd think about it. Derek passed the bread. We talked about his work, a construction project in Columbus with delays. Normal dinner, normal evening. I waited until they were watching television in the living room, and I went back to my laptop at the kitchen table. I started a document. Dates, items, listing prices, the username on the selling account. I cross-referenced every sold listing against my memory of what had been in the house. I have a good memory. 30 years of woodshop means you track your tools. You know what you have and what's missing and when. By 10:30 that night, I had a list of 19 items. Estimated total value, around $4,000, based on the sale prices on the listings. The pearl earrings were listed as available, unsold, $17. My sister-in-law's earrings, $17. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark kitchen for a while. Thought about my wife, thought about the look on her face when I gave her the necklace. 25 years in and she'd cried a little, said I didn't have to. I said yes, I did. I thought about Derek, my son, who I raised to be honest, who carried boxes into my house, believing he was staying a couple weeks, and who probably had no idea what was happening under the same roof. I didn't pour a drink. I thought about it and then I didn't. Instead, I called my old friend Walt. Walt had been my colleague for 22 years, taught history at the same school, retired the same year I did. His daughter was a paralegal in Cincinnati. He was sharp, practical, and the kind of man who did not panic. I trusted him more than anyone I could think of. Walt, I said when he picked up, I need a favor, and I need you to not mention it to anyone yet, including Derek. Pause. His particular kind of pause that meant he was already paying full attention. Tell me, he said. I told him everything. The box, the listings, the document I'd started, the 19 items. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was another pause. Do you have screenshots? He asked. I said I hadn't thought to do that yet. Screenshot everything tonight before any listings disappear. Send them to me and keep your own copies. Do you want me to come over? I said I didn't need him to come over. I said I just needed to tell someone who wouldn't react in a way that made everything worse. You're going to need an attorney, Walt said. I know. And you're going to need to decide about Derek. I know that too. He said he'd wait for my screenshots and he'd ask his daughter for a recommendation. I spent the next hour taking screenshots on my phone of every listing, every sold item, prices, dates, the username. I emailed them to Walt and saved copies in a folder I labeled Spring Projects. Because old habits, and because I wasn't ready to give this a file name that made it real. The next morning, Cassandra made coffee and asked if I wanted pancakes. I said that sounded great. She made them from scratch. I ate them and said they were delicious, which they were. My wife would have found that deeply ironic. Over the next 2 weeks, I learned more about Cassandra than I had in the 5 years I'd known her. Not by snooping, not by going through her things, but by paying the kind of careful attention I'd been too polite or too trusting to pay before. I noticed she carried a tote bag out of the house twice a week, returning without it. I noticed packages arriving addressed to her that weren't from any company I recognized. I noticed she asked me twice if I planned to do anything with the vintage fishing equipment in the back of the garage. I said I hadn't decided. I had decided. I was keeping it. Walt's contact was a woman named Harriet Crane, civil attorney with experience in theft and property disputes. I drove to her office on a Tuesday when Cassandra was on a work call and Derek was at a site meeting. I brought my documentation folder in a manila envelope. Harriet was 60 years, small, with reading glasses on a chain, and the manner of someone who had heard a great deal of difficult things over a long career without being particularly surprised by any of them. She went through my folder without expression. This is good documentation. You did this yourself? Taught high school for 31 years. You learned to keep records. She set the folder down. You have the original receipts for any of these items? I have the receipt for the necklace. I have photos of my wife wearing most of the pieces. Timestamps from her phone's photo library. That helps. The challenge here is that it's your property, your home, and the items were in your home while she was staying there as a guest. That makes this what we'd call a conversion situation. She's taken your personal property and sold it for profit without permission. Combined with the documentation, the online listings, the account history, This is genuinely actionable. I told her about the pearl earrings, that they belonged to my wife's mother, that my sister-in-law was coming to collect them. She looked at me over her glasses. Those are already sold? Listed, not sold yet. Then we can try to pull them back. She made a note. Mr. Calloway, what outcome are you looking for here? I thought about it. I want my wife's things back where they can be. I want my son to know the truth, and I want her to understand that she can't do this to people. Those are 3 different problems with 3 different solutions, she said. I know. I've been a teacher, I said. I'm used to problems that don't have one answer. She almost smiled. Come back Friday. I'll have a plan. The plan took 2 weeks to complete. Harriet filed a civil theft claim. She contacted the online platform with documentation of the stolen property listings. The pearl earrings were flagged, and the sale was blocked. The necklace and 2 other items were tracked to buyers through platform records, one of whom agreed to return the necklace voluntarily when Harriet explained the circumstances. The man said he'd paid $65 for it, and he'd been wondering about the provenance. I told Harriet to tell him thank you. I meant it. Harriet also suggested I involve the police and file a formal report to create a record, even if I didn't press criminal charges immediately. I did that on a Wednesday, walked into the station on my lunch break, as I'd started thinking of my mornings, and filed the report. The officer was young and thorough. He made copies of everything. Walt drove me home afterward. In the car, he said, "You have to tell Derek." I know. When? When I'm ready. Raymond. When I'm ready, Walt. He drove. He didn't push it. That's the thing about old friends. They know when they've said enough. I had been building something in the garage for 3 weeks. A wooden jewelry box. Cherry wood, dovetail joints at the corners, a soft felt lining I'd cut and fitted by hand, a small brass latch that had to be ordered special. It was the finest piece of small furniture I'd made in years. My wife used to say that when I was angry about something I couldn't control, I built. She was right. I'd built most of the furniture in the house that way. The rocking chair I'd been refinishing when my son called was one I built the year I found out my father had cancer. Cassandra had admired the jewelry box 3 weeks earlier when she'd walked through the garage and seen me starting it. She'd asked what it was for. I said I was making it for myself. She'd tilted her head and said it would be beautiful, that she loved things like that she wished Derek was handy. I'd said thank you and kept working. Now it was finished. Cherry wood glowing, joints tight and invisible. The kind of box that lasts 100 years if you take care of it. I also put something inside it, printed on plain paper, 7 pages, organized cleanly the way I'd organized shop safety handouts for 30 years. Page 1. The full list of items taken, with descriptions, estimated values, and dates of disappearance. Pages 2 through 5. Screenshots of every online listing with dates and sale prices, the username, the account history. Page 6. A copy of the civil claim Harriet had filed. Page 7. The police report number and the name of the officer I'd spoken to. On top of that, a single note card in my handwriting. Cassandra, these belong to my wife. She worked hard for them. She would have wanted someone to take care of them. I closed the box and latched it. That Saturday afternoon, Derek was watching a game in the living room, and Cassandra was in the kitchen. I carried the box in and set it on the kitchen table. She turned from the counter, and her face changed when she saw it. Raymond, is that the box from your garage? Finished it last week. I thought you should have it. She came forward, hands out, already reaching for it. Her face was open in a way I had rarely seen. Genuine pleasure. She ran her fingers over the lid. This is gorgeous. Derek, come look at this. My son appeared in the doorway. He looked at the box, then at me. Dad, you made this? I did. Cassandra was already lifting the latch. You are so talented. I can't believe you're just giving me this. After everything I said about the guest bathroom, she laughed a little, nervous and grateful. The lid opened. She saw the note card first. Read it. Her expression didn't change immediately, the way it takes a second for cold water to register. Then she lifted the note card and saw page 1. The sound she made wasn't quite a word, more like something leaving the room quickly. Derek stepped forward. What is that? He looked at the papers in her hands. His face was still open, still normal, still catching up. Ask your wife, I said. I kept my voice the same tone I'd used for 30 years when a student had done something I already knew about and was waiting for them to tell me themselves. Cassandra set the papers down on the table. She didn't run. She didn't yell. She said, very quietly, "These are things you weren't using." Derek picked up the pages. I watched him read. The silence was the worst kind. The kind a classroom goes when a student says something that changes the temperature permanently. My son read all 7 pages. He put them down. He looked at Cassandra. He looked at me. He looked back at the table. "Mom's necklace," he said. His voice was not quite his voice. She started to say something about it being in a drawer, that she'd thought it was forgotten, that she was going to tell him that the apartment costs had been so high and the mold remediation. "And I know it looks bad, but where's the money?" Derek said. Not loudly. Quiet the way men get when they are holding something with both hands to keep it from becoming something worse. "There wasn't much," she said. "Where is it?" "It's gone." "Derek, our bills?" "My mother's necklace paid your bills." The kitchen was very still. I was standing by the table with my hands at my sides. I'd been very careful not to touch the box after she opened it. "Evidence," Harriet had told me. "Don't complicate things." My son turned and went back to the living room. I heard him sit down heavily on the couch. The television was still on. Someone had scored something. Cassandra looked at me. Her expression had moved through several things and landed on something I recognized from years of teaching. The look of someone who has been caught and is trying to decide whether anger or contrition gives them more ground to stand on. "You've been building that box for 3 weeks, she said. "I have." "You knew this whole time." "I've known for about 5 weeks. She breathed out slowly. "And you never said anything." "I was gathering information. I didn't see the point in having a conversation I wasn't ready to finish." She pulled out a kitchen chair and sat down, like her legs had made a decision her mind hadn't caught up to. "I'm not a bad person," she said. I didn't answer that. I've been a teacher long enough to know that some statements are best left with no response. "The pearl earrings," I said instead. "My sister-in-law is coming in 6 weeks. Her mother gave those to my wife, and my wife promised them to her before she passed. I stopped that listing before they sold. I'd like them back." Long pause. "They're in my car," she said. "I hadn't gotten around to mailing them yet. I'd like them tonight." She got them. That night, after she'd gone upstairs, I sat in the living room with my son. The game had ended sometime during the kitchen conversation. The screen was black. Derek sat with his elbows on his knees, not looking at anything particular. "How long has this been happening?" he said. "Since about 2 weeks after you moved in. Possibly before. I don't know what she may have taken during previous visits." He put his face in his hands. "Stayed that way." "Dad, Don't apologize for her," I said. "I should have noticed. You trusted your wife in your father-in-law's house. That's not a character flaw." He laughed, short and humorless. "What is it then?" I thought for a moment. "Expensive information," I said. "But now you have it." He was quiet again for a while. Outside a car passed. The refrigerator hummed. Normal sounds of a house at night that were once my wife's sounds and then just my sounds and now too many people's sounds. "She's going to say it wasn't a big deal," he said. "She's going to minimize it, say she was going to pay it back, that it was stuff you weren't using." "Probably. What do I do with that?" "Derek," I said, "that is between you and her. I've done what I needed to do. What you do now is yours to decide." "But you filed a police report." "I did. Are you going to press charges?" "I don't know yet," I said, which was honest. Harriet had said the civil claim would likely result in a judgment for the value of the goods sold. Whether I pushed for criminal prosecution was still an open question. I was still deciding what kind of outcome I was actually after. My son nodded slowly. "I'm sorry," he said again. "Not for her this time, for not being here more. After Mom died, I should have called more. Come home more. The house felt different. She felt different. Being here was hard. I know. You still had the same dishes, same chairs." "I kept everything," I said. "It seemed right." He was quiet. "Then, did she know about the necklace? Did Mom know what that necklace meant to you?" "She knew exactly what it meant," I said. "There's a photo of her wearing it. The one in the hallway. I know which photo it is." We sat with that for a minute. Harriet had already received the proceeds from the civil claim in full by the following Thursday. Cassandra had an account, apparently, that she'd kept separate from their joint finances. Derek hadn't known about it. The amount deposited into my account covered all but about $300 of what the stolen items had sold for. The necklace was back on the dresser where it belonged. Cassandra moved out to stay with her sister in Columbus while she and Derek figured out their next steps. She left while I was running errands, which I suspect was deliberate. There was no goodbye. The guest bedroom was neat when I looked in later. Bed made. No sign she'd been there except a faint smell of her perfume that the open window cleared by evening. Walt came over that Friday. We had coffee in the garage the way we had every Friday before we both retired, the habit outlasting the job. He looked at the empty workbench where the jewelry box had stood for 3 weeks. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Tired," I said. "Not victorious, just tired." That's probably the honest answer. "I thought about what outcome I wanted," I said. "Remember when you asked me that? You said 3 different problems. I said I wanted my wife's things back. I wanted my son to know the truth, and I wanted her to understand she couldn't do this to people. And got 2 out of 3 for certain. The necklace is back. Derek knows. Whether she understands something, that's out of my hands." Walt drank his coffee. 2 out of 3 from a retired shop teacher with a folder of screenshots and a handmade jewelry box. He shook his head. "Margaret would have loved this," he said. "My wife. She would have loved how patient you were." I'd known Walt long enough to know this was the highest compliment he offered. The civil judgment was recorded publicly, which I hadn't fully considered. Harriet mentioned it matter-of-factly as an outcome. A former colleague found it somehow, the way things get found in small professional circles, and called me. Then 2 others. Then a woman from Derek's neighborhood sent a message to Derek on Facebook asking if she should trust someone named Cassandra who had sold her things that turned out not to match their descriptions. It became, briefly, a thing people in our extended circle knew about. I hadn't planned that part. Derek called me on a Tuesday evening, 3 weeks after Cassandra had gone to Columbus. He sounded steadier than he had in the kitchen that Saturday, like he'd slept better. "She wants to work on it," he said. "See a counselor. Says it was a compulsion, that she felt out of control financially and couldn't talk to me about it, so she found another way." "Do you believe her?" "I believe she believes it," he said. "I don't know if that's the same thing. It might be a place to start." "You're not going to tell me what to do." "No. Even though you have an opinion. I have several opinions. None of them are relevant. She's your wife. This is your marriage. I'm your father, and I'll love you regardless of what you decide." He was quiet for a moment. "She took Mom's things." "She did. I can't just forget that." "You don't have to forget anything. Memory and forgiveness aren't the same transaction." He exhaled slowly. "Did Mom ever tell you about something she chose to forgive? Something big?" I thought about that. "Your grandmother," I said. "My mother-in-law. She was very critical of your mother when we first married. Said things that were genuinely unkind. Your mother forgave her completely by the time you were born. I asked her once how she did it, and she said she just decided the forgiveness was more useful to her than the anger was. That it was a practical choice as much as a moral one. That's Mom. That's exactly your mother." He didn't say anything for a while. I could hear him breathing. Kitchen sounds in the background. Life sounds. "I miss her," he said. "I know. Me too." The pearl earrings were on the nightstand in the guest room, set aside for my sister-in-law's visit. I'd stopped by the bedroom doorway twice in the past week, just to confirm they were there. Old habit. Know where things are. Track your inventory. 31 years of teaching boys and girls to work with their hands, to measure twice and cut once, to build things that would outlast their moods and their impatience. I told every class on the first day that wood has memory. Every cut you make, it holds. You can sand and refinish and restore, but the wood remembers what happened to it. The grain tells the story. People are like that too. I went back out to the garage that evening after the call with Derek. Sat on my stool at the workbench with the shop lights on, and the rest of the house dark at my back. I had materials for another project. A small cabinet, simple design, the kind that takes maybe a week if you work steadily. I'd been putting it off. I pulled it toward me, took my pencil from behind my ear the way I'd been doing since 1988, made the first marks on the wood. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. Inside, the house had its night sounds. The refrigerator, the settle of old walls, the particular creak of the third step that I'd never gotten around to fixing because I'd come to think of it as the house's voice. My wife used to say it made her feel safe, knowing the house would announce if anyone came in. My son was 3 states away working on what comes next. My wife's necklace was back on the dresser where it belonged. The pearl earrings were waiting for the woman who'd always been meant to have them. The wood was cool and solid under my hands. I worked slowly. I wasn't happy exactly. But I was at peace with the choices I'd made, which at 66 I've come to understand is something different from happiness, and in most ways more durable. Happiness comes and goes. Peace with your own choices that you can carry. My son called again a few days later, morning this time, while I was drinking coffee and reading. He didn't preamble. "Dad, she found a counselor. I'm going to 2 sessions with her, and then we'll see." "Okay." I told her she has to write a letter to Aunt Deb about the earrings. Explain what happened, directly. That was his idea, not mine. I didn't say anything, just listened. She agreed, he said. It wasn't easy. There was a lot of crying, but she agreed. I said that sounded like a start. He said, "I know you're not going to tell me if I'm making the right call." I said that was right. I wasn't. "But you're not telling me I'm making the wrong one either." "No," I said. "I'm not telling you that." He said he'd call Sunday. I said I'd be home. I was. We talked for 40 minutes about nothing in particular. His work, my garage project, a game he'd watched. At the end, he said, "I love you, Dad." He'd said it before. He was not an unaffectionate person, but there was a weight to it that afternoon that was different, like he meant something layered by it. "I love you too, son," I said. I set the phone down and looked out the kitchen window at the backyard. The garden my wife planted 20 years ago that I'd maintained badly, and then, 2 summers ago, learned to maintain properly because abandoning it felt like a second kind of loss. The roses were starting to come up again. She'd chosen them for the color, something between coral and orange that she said looked like late afternoon light in September. I went out and checked on them the way she'd taught me. Hands in the dirt, checking the soil, the new growth at the bases. Everything was coming back the way it always does. I stood there in the backyard for a while. Then I went back inside to finish my coffee. If this story moved you in any way, please give it a like and subscribe to Pure Revenge Stories. Leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to hear from you. And if you want more stories like this one, the next one is already waiting for you in the box on the left.